It can't be personal, or you're just vigilante.
Vigilante is just a man lost in the scramble for his own gratification. He can be destroyed. If you make yourself more than just a man, if you devote yourself to an ideal, then you become something else entirely.
As a man, I'm flesh and blood. I can be ignored, I can be destroyed, but as a symbol, I can be everlasting.
Commissioner Love set up a massive task force to catch you. He thinks you're dangerous.
What do you think?
I think you're trying to help. But I've been wrong before.
Well, if a guy dresses up like a bat, clearly has issues.
He's done something the police have never done.
Do I look like a clown?
You can't take the law into your own hands.
Who are you?
Someone who rattled the cages.
At least tell me your name.
I'm Batman.
You are my greatest student. It should be you standing by my side, saving the world.
I'll be standing where I belong. Between you and the people of Gotham.
Not who you are underneath.
But what I do, it defines me.
Bruce?
I've previously spoken about my problems with the Dark Knight trilogy in a video that, well, let's be nice and say was quite divisive. But the truth of the matter is that I don't hate these movies. I just don't necessarily love them as Batman movies. They're all really well-made cinematic experiences, but I just don't feel like they properly convey the character or the mythos surrounding that character. That's not to say that I myself don't enjoy the movies in their own right. I do, just as their own individual stories. I actually happen to really like these movies. I don't see them as Batman stories. I see them as completely different stories that use the Batman mythos kinda as a skin. Though I think that really only extends to the last two Dark Knight films. Because Batman Begins, quite frankly, is pretty close to feeling like the content and the canon that it's based on. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. So let's begin with our look back at the Dark Knight movies and start where it all begins. Christopher Nolan was clearly taking pages out of books he'd already written when making this movie, crafting together a story that cuts between several separate integral moments in Bruce Wayne and Batman's history, and piecing them together to create a sort of character study on the Caped Crusader, following Bruce and Batman in their defining moments, from what inspired him to take on the mantle, to what made him capable of taking on said mantle. This all serves as a prelude to the actual plot, building up to Bruce's first night as Batman. In the hands of a less talented director, this could come off as very incoherent and messy, but here, every scene leads into the next, and it also circles back around to the last. It's almost like we're watching a montage minus the music. We're living in the moments that typically would be cut up and put into a montage, and we're learning more about the character because of it. We also see how these events later on affect Bruce in the narrative, how the tactical combat training and misdirections picked up by the League of Shadows helped him later in life, each experience teaching him new important lessons or tricks of the crime-fighting trade. Even in his own personal life, whatever little that he has, he never stops learning. This is a trait that you would hope to see in a Batman. Because in life, you only stop learning when you stop having the capacity to learn. Every character in Bruce's story is an unknown proprietor of knowledge, helping shape and form the Dark Knight. It's a lot like the Batman in that way. I find that really interesting because I think that can apply to any piece of advice you give or are given in life. You never know what will resonate with people. You never know what sort of impact your words could have on someone else's experience. Something as simple as saying we fall to learn to pick ourselves back up could have a profound effect on someone's development. This movie is almost an exercise in cause and effect. We see how Gothamites have helped create the mythos of Batman. Carmine Falcone shows Bruce that despite what he may think, he still has something to lose, teaching him that his adversaries and enemies would go after his loved ones should he stand up to them, thus causing this Bruce to don the cape and cowl, protecting those in his personal life by hiding himself. Now you mix that with Ra's al Ghul's talks of becoming a symbol, something bigger than just a mere man, and that becomes the catalyst for Batman. Bruce takes all these words of wisdom to head and to heart, and it's only through others that Bruce begins to see the forest through the trees. Despite being an alleged loner, it was the involvement of others that helped establish this Batman. Bruce is not the one-man army he seems to think that he is. Everything in this movie is a team effort. Bruce couldn't do his night-to-night hero work without the support of Alfred, the mind of Lucius Fox, and eventually, the belief of Officer Gordon. What I like is that while the movie shows Bruce being depicted as a loner at first by chance, it also shows that later in life that isolation is brought on by choice. The world didn't reject Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne rejected the world after seeing its ugly side up close and personal. He keeps to himself and tries to shut out the rest of the city. Yet despite his inability to willingly be a part of the team, one forms around him, with Alfred and Lucius Fox taking on secret sidekick roles. Bruce is only alone in his own mind, which given his trauma makes sense to me. He's lived his life so long in darkness that that's all he can see, the very darkness that birthed him. Those close to him try to provide light, but for him, it's too dim. In his own mind, this is something he needs to do on his own, though he does not. Eventually their words and concerns begin to take a toll. And by the end of the movie, Bruce opens himself up more, accepting and taking the help of others, and even trusting his childhood crush with his deepest, darkest secret. The movie may be called Batman Begins, as it shows the beginning stages of Batman, but it also shows the beginning stages of Bruce Wayne. Alfred helps him realize that one mask isn't enough. He needs two to protect his identity. Bruce needs a much more public persona to mask his actions, to hide his true masked face. Batman needs the guise of Bruce Wayne to divert attention away from, Bruce Wayne. Bruce being a shut-in and a recluse, who is not present at any major events someone like him would normally attend, would certainly make many question what this billionaire does with all this free time. He needs to be seen out and about, acting in a smug and selfish way, because who could ever believe that this over-the-top narcissistic personality, who can't see past a mirror, would spend so much of his time moonlighting as a selfless savior of the innocent? He also needs a way of covering up the bruises and bone breaks he experiences as the Dark Knight. And a lot of that could be easily explained away by a lavish lifestyle with interesting hobbies. I don't want to talk in length about a lot of the characters, mainly because I've already made previous videos where I did just that. So without sounding too repetitive, let me just say that the cast is well cast. The performances range from serviceable to award-worthy. Everyone plays their parts well, or at the very least, well enough. There is not a bad performance amongst them, at least in my opinion. Because a lot of people seem to hate Katie Holmes' performance in the film, but I can't really enroll in that school of thought. I don't think she was fantastic by any means. She certainly wasn't giving Michelle Pfeiffer a run for her money as the best big-screen Batman love interest, but she played the part modestly. She's not bad overall, but admittedly, the performance does feel a little bit out of place here. It feels like she just stepped foot off Dawson's Creek, and that's mainly because she just did. Playing Bruce's trusted childhood friend and love interest, she adds another layer of humanity to the titular character, grounding him and bringing him back to reality when even Alfred can't. At this stage of life, Bruce has no desire to be Bruce Wayne. He's solely devoted to the cause, to being Batman. He's gotten so lost in the idea of becoming a symbol that he's completely forgotten what it means to just be a man, as evident by his initial cold nature toward Alfred, who's really just a beacon of warmth. The only thing that reels Bruce back into the possibility of normality is his love for Rachel, so much so that we see him instantaneously drop the act in her presence. Make no mistake, Rachel is an important piece of the puzzle here, because while characters like Alfred know the true Bruce, he's his elder, a father figure of sorts. But Rachel grew up with Bruce Wayne. She's someone who's his age and on his level. No other big screen Batman has ever really had that. In a way, she knows Bruce on a lot more of an intimate level than any other character has, not just in these movies, but in any other on-screen adaptation either. Her inclusion also gave Bruce a long-term love interest, whereas the previous films had him swap out women with each new installment like he was James Bond. These movies at the very least gave us something a little bit more consistent. It's also nice to know that at one point in life, Bruce had a normal life. He had friends, he had normality. The two characters are also a lot alike. There's plenty different about them, but there's also a lot of similarities as well. Like Bruce, Rachel Dawes is a well-intentioned justice seeker who goes above and beyond for the truth. Unlike Bruce, she's never left Gotham City. It's important to note that this character doesn't exist in the comics, as she was specifically created for the movie. So before The Dark Knight came out and proved me wrong, I legitimately thought that Rachel was just going to be a gender-swapped Harvey Dent. Think about it. Longtime best bud of Gotham's favorite son, working as Gotham's district attorney? Yeah, sounds familiar. I'm glad that wound up not being the route that they took. Bale's Batman here doesn't feel as forced as it would be in future films. Sure, he's doing the put-on scary voice, but it's at a tolerable 2 here, whereas the other movies have him crank it up to a 12. He feels a lot more natural in the role here, as opposed to in the Dark Knight films. I also think we see just enough of him in the costume. It's never overexposed or underutilized. We see just enough of him to be captivated when he's on screen. There certainly seems to be more of a mystique here than in future films. I've said before that I wasn't a huge fan of this Batman, but I find that most of my problems with the performance come from the next 2 installments. He's more than serviceable in the first movie. In contrast, Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne is still my favorite by far. Actually, really anytime he's not wearing the mask and putting on a voice, I genuinely think he's doing a fantastic job. He was always buyable in the part. Whether he was putting on a persona or playing the person, Bale made Bruce Wayne believable, and more so over made Batman feel more man than Bat. Upon returning to Wayne Enterprises, he almost immediately bonds with Lucius Fox, as the two are both sort of forgotten relics of the company's past. His long-standing friendship with his father makes it easier for Bruce to trust him and develop a dynamic of their own. I really appreciate that Fox is smart enough to see through Bruce's facade and excuses, but continues to work on the technology for him anyway just because he thinks he's a good kid. That's kinda sweet. Again, I don't want to talk excessively about him here because I think this Lucius Fox is worthy of a video of his own, but in short, the point I want to get across here is, I think he really defined what this character is, and gave his successors unnecessarily big boots to fill. Whenever I think of Lucius Fox, I think of Morgan Freeman. He is just Lucius Fox to me. Michael Caine also did a great job as Alfred, even if he did give one too many speeches. Alfred spends his screen time desperately trying to reel Bruce back to reality, nagging at him to pay attention to his personal life. While Bruce is out there looking after Gotham City, Alfred is back at Wayne Manor looking after him. He has a knack for knowing what to say and how to say it, but unfortunately at first, a lot of his words fall on deaf ears. Unsurprisingly, Gary Oldman completely loses himself in the role of Jim Gordon. And this being Gary Oldman was lost on me when I first watched it. I don't know how he does it, but he literally has never looked the same in any 2 roles. Anytime he enters a set, he leaves his identity back at home. I don't know how to articulate this, but Gary Oldman, more than anybody else, just felt like Jim Gordon to me. Juggling the struggles of a family life with the complications that come with law and order. He's a good guy in a bad place trying his best. One of the very few GCPD officers who haven't been corrupted by the city. He wears his heart on his sleeve and he holds his head high. I appreciate that the story takes place earlier in the character's career, before he was even made commissioner. We see that this isn't just an origin story for Batman, it's an origin story for a lot of Gotham City. There was a point in time where I truly believed Liam Neeson was the greatest Ra's al Ghul we've ever gotten and would ever get. I don't still believe that today, because I think we've gotten a few more valid and more accurate versions of the villain, but that hasn't taken away my love for this particular performance. He was great in both sides of the role. Liam Neeson was the perfect choice to play mentor and menace. I believed him in the first half as a teacher, and I believe him in the latter half as a punisher. He's a master manipulator, a wolf in sheep's clothing hidden in plain sight. I find his relationship with Bruce to be pretty true to form. He doesn't harbor hatred for the Dark Knight, just a disappointment at what he defines as his failures. He becomes his former protege's enemy, not by his choice, but by Bruce's. He's invested time and trading into this young Padawan and saw potential in him, but their moral compasses conflict, making the two clash as Bruce stands in the way of his end goal, meaning that he'll have to go through him to meet it. For my money, it's the best whitewashed, Lazarus Pitless Ra's al Ghul there's ever been. Not trying to be PC here and win any internet points, just saying that the character's nationality is sort of actually important to the character. But then again, Damian Wayne is consistently drawn to be a white kid, so, you know, just make of that what you will. I will say in the defense of this movie, it was combining characters, and one could say that they were looking for a cross between Batman's main mentors. And you know what? That's good enough. though we'll get back to that subject a little bit later. Additionally, they sort of covered their tracks by having Ken Wannabe playing Ra's al Ghul's decoy, which again, given the situation, is a fine enough solution, giving the audience the best of both worlds, still having representation in the roots of the character, while being able to pull off a twist villain reveal with an actor who can succeed both as villain and vigilante. But still, it does sort of feel like a little bit of a cop-out. The only thing that stops this from being mentioned in the same breath as the Iron Man 3 Mandarin reveal is the brilliant performance from Liam Neeson, transitioning from teacher to threat with ease. The Scarecrow here is expertly played, but the script also plays him as a pawn. Cillian Murphy gives Jonathan Crane an eerie and unnerving presence. He's not a physical threat, and he knows that, which is why he hides behind parlor tricks and manipulation of the mind, using his victims' greatest fears against them. I'm grateful for this interpretation, as it was the first time the Scarecrow character has ever been put to screen. And Cillian Murphy gave a really unsettling, unnerving performance that feels right in line with that comic character. But seeing him reduced to prop for the real big bad doesn't feel like the greatest use of this character. Still, you can't deny how great this performance is, as he's the only on-screen villain to make an appearance in every installment of this trilogy. The movie has a bunch of unsung heroes, or more accurately, villains. It is the first time ever that characters like Victor Zsasz and Carmine Falcone have ever been brought to the big screen, though Zaz's inclusion is really easy to miss. The actor definitely has the right look for the part, but doesn't factor into enough of the movie to determine if he was right for the part. He doesn't even have so much as a line of dialogue in the whole movie, which is fine as he's really only a plot point that doubles as some solid fan service. I will, however, argue that the character is greatly misrepresented, as in this telling of the tale, the story surrounding him is that Dr. Crane is having criminals placed in Arkham Asylum when they don't suffer from mental illness and belong in prison instead. That's a great story to go with. But this is a terrible spokesman for that narrative. Victor Zsasz most certainly does belong in Arkham Asylum. He's psychotic, he's clinically insane. I've always thought that this plot would have worked much better with characters like Black Mask or Sal Maroni, or even if they just decided to tie this into the Joe Chill story. Suffice it to say, Victor Zsasz is not the right person for this part. In terms of mob mentality, it's hard to sing the praises of this Carmine Falcone, if only because in recent years we've gotten much better and much more accurate representations of that crime lord. I actually do think that this is the worst Falcone that's ever been put to screen, but I think that has less to do with the quality of this performance and much more to do with the quality of future performances. Ultimately, it was fine, but that's really all you can say for it. This was a great starting point for that character. I just don't think that anyone's gonna claim this to be the definitive Carmine Falcone. Detective Flass was a lot of fun. He's one of the characters that I feel isn't given nearly enough recognition or love from fans of the trilogy. He played the perfect opposite of the man who sat opposite to him. He was a comedically corrupt cop with little regard for anything outside of his own gain, not hesitating to double-cross his department and even the few people he'd been friendly with. I always felt like this interpretation of the character was meant to be an amalgamation of the actual Arnold Flass and Detective Harvey Bullock. As a matter of fact, when I first watched this movie, I actually believed that this was Harvey Bullock. Rutger Hauer also did an incredible job not as a villain of Batman's, but a villain of Bruce Wayne's. I'll always appreciate the fact that the movie gave both sides of the character their own unique challenges. One thing I really want to compliment this movie on is some of the changes that it made to the mythos. Look, I'm normally a hound for original continuity, but a lot of these changes were well warranted and bettered the final product. Changing the League of Assassins to the League of Shadows, I thought was a pretty good call. Considering Bruce is now and has always been very anti-murder due to watching his parents be murdered, it makes much more sense to me that he'd willingly join a team called the League of Shadows rather than a gang called the League of Assassins. I also thought that Batman being blindsided by the fact that the League wanted him to kill was a little bit silly given their name. You know, you couldn't tell that the League of Assassins would want you to assassinate people. It's like being a part of Mickey Mouse's Funhouse and then complaining about the rats. You really couldn't figure that out? You couldn't read the word and then figure out what it meant? So much for being the world's greatest detective. Combining characters Henry Ducard and Ra's al Ghul, two characters who have been pretty instrumental in Bruce's background, each training him in the comics in separate continuities and, well, sometimes in the same continuity at separate times, it made sense to just cram them together and make Liam Neeson an amalgamation of the two. It condenses these story beats and provides the main villain with a valid disguise. Having Bruce and his family go out to see a Bat-themed play as opposed to Zorro, the night that his parents died, I think makes a lot of sense for the story. Zorro still works here, but this change seems to mean a little bit more. The fact that bats are so deeply rooted in his personal trauma, in a weird way playing a part in the night of his parents' death and his own rebirth. There are elements that I feel the first film did right that were lost in the later sequels. Batman Begins really captured the grittiness of Gotham City. It looks like the land of the lost, a proverbial purgatory here on Earth. From the way the city is shown to the way its citizens act. It's a cesspool for crime and constant chaos. It's grimy, it's gritty, it's not a place you'd want to be. So it's kind of a bummer to see the nightmare-fueled slums just become any other city in The Dark Knight. Here, Gotham has its own unique personality. And if it was a person, it would not be any person you'd like to meet. The follow-up films make the city feel much more grand and much more, well, nondescript. Christopher Nolan did an incredible job of weaving together various points in the mythos and paving over them smoothly. When a lot of these plot points for the character were originally established, canon wasn't really anything anyone cared about. The goal of every comic, for the most part, was to tell its own unique story, not worry about where it fits into a wider continuity. So, because of this, there's been a lot of conflictions, contradictions, and just, well, overall oversights in Batman's background. But Batman Begins takes elements and story beats from several continuities and manages to crisscross canons and play out fluidly. Batman Begins is a fantastic origin story for the character, because not only does it give the backstory of Batman, but it also acts as the blueprint for Batman. The events that led to him being Batman. The training that gave him these abilities, the lessons that he's learned along the way and how he applied them to his craft, his ideology on crime fighting and heroics. I really think that Batman Begins kinda serves as a gateway to the character's soul. Out of all the movies in the Dark Knight series, I think that Batman Begins feels the most like a Batman movie. Not just because of both Bruce and Batman being the focal point in his titular movie, but just the way the movie depicted the characters in the setting. I love this movie as a movie, and I love this movie as a Batman movie. I think Batman Begins is an excellent origin for The Dark Knight. It's not my personal favorite, but it's pretty close. With all that being said, if you like this video and would be interested in seeing a video on The Dark Knight, by all means, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
And Batman Begins.
Now, before I go, I don't usually do this. I've had a Patreon for a while now, but I've really struggled with what to do with it. Luckily, the time is upon us where I can actually offer you guys exclusive and extended content that I can't make here on the channel. With new restrictions on what kind of content can be monetized or hell, even shown here on the platform, now's as good a time as ever to be placing my completely unaltered, uncensored, extended videos on my Patreon. I don't want to put my videos behind a paywall, but that's kind of the best place to put them for the time being. So if there was ever a time to give a stranger money on the internet, well, I would like to think that now is that time. Just so everyone knows, all the money I make off my Patreon goes directly back into the channel. Everyone who donates to the Patreon will not be seen as a fan, but rather a producer of said content. And you will be credited as such in the closing credits here on the channel. So if you have the time and $1 to spare, help a guy out. If you can't, I appreciate your time and attention nonetheless.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.